Martinez stood in the center of the enormous chamber and tried not to show his fear. The room stretched so far in every direction that he could barely see the walls. Above him, below him, and all around him floated thousands of alien beings. Some had bodies. Others were just lights or clouds of energy. This was the Galactic Assembly, and every species in known space had sent someone to be here today, but only cared about the ones directly in front of him. They called themselves the Architects. They looked like tall figures made of crystal that glowed from within. Their faces had no features, just smooth surfaces that sometimes showed images or words. These beings claimed they had become gods thousands of years ago. They said they had uploaded their minds into massive computer networks that could predict anything and solve any problem. The largest architect floated forward. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. We have reviewed the species known as humanity. We have studied their history, their wars, their crimes against their own planet. The evidence is clear. A hologram appeared in the air between and the architects. It showed scenes from Earth's history, wars with guns and bombs, cities burning, forests being cut down, animals going extinct, the ocean filling with plastic, people starving while others had too much. Every terrible thing humanity had ever done, displayed for everyone to see. Felt his face grow hot. He wanted to argue, to explain, but the images kept coming. They showed the world wars. They showed nuclear weapons. They showed climate disasters and political violence. It went on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, the images stopped. The lead architect, who called itself Luminous Thought Ascending, spoke again. This species is savage. They are violent, destructive, and primitive. Despite achieving basic space travel, they remain a threat to themselves and potentially to the galactic community. Found his voice. We have made mistakes, every species does, but we have also done incredible things. We have art and music. We help each other in disasters. We explore because we want to learn, not conquer. We are getting better. Better is not good enough, another architect said. This one's crystal body pulsed with red light. You have been a spacefaring civilization for less than 100 years. In that time, you have already had conflicts over resources in your own solar system. You nearly started a war over asteroid mining rights. We solved that peacefully, protested. After your ships aimed weapons at each other, the Red Architect replied. This is exactly the behavior we cannot allow in our galaxy. Luminous Thought Ascending raised what might have been a hand. The gesture brought silence to the entire chamber. The Council of Ascended Civilizations has made a decision. Humanity has two choices. First, you may submit to guided evolution. We will send teachers to your world. They will help reshape your culture, your education, your government. Within a few generations, your violent tendencies will be corrected. You will become peaceful, rational, and worthy of joining galactic society. And the second choice, asked though he dreaded the answer. Quarantine. You will be restricted to your solar system for 1,000 of your years. All contact with other species will be forbidden. You will have that time to evolve on your own if you can. When the quarantine ends, we will evaluate you again. Felt the weight of those words. 1,000 years. Every human alive today would be dead. Their children's children's children would be dead. Earth would be alone in the universe, cut off from all the knowledge and technology the galaxy had to offer. We need time to discuss this with our government, said carefully. You have 72 hours, Luminous Thought Ascending announced. Return here with your answer. Know that our gods, the collective consciousness of the divine matrix, have foreseen the results of both paths. We are trying to help you, Ambassador Martinez. Your species is not evil, merely young and dangerous. Accept our guidance. The crystal beings began to fade, returning to wherever they came from. The other species in the gallery started to leave as well. But as turned to go, he noticed something strange. In the highest seats, far above the main floor, sat three groups of aliens he had never seen before. They were ancient-looking, with wrinkled skin or weathered metal bodies. They had not spoken during the entire proceeding. One of them, a being that looked like it was made of twisted wood and stone, was staring directly at. As their eyes met, the alien did something unexpected. It shook its head slowly, just once. Then it tapped the side of its head and pointed at before disappearing in a flash of light. Did not know what the gesture meant, but his gut told him it was important. Back on the human ship, the mood was dark. Captain Lisa Hayes paced back and forth in the conference room. This is ridiculous. They are treating us like children who need to be taught how to behave. Maybe we do, said Doctor from his seat at the table. The elderly scientist looked tired. They are not wrong about our history. We have been incredibly violent. Every species has been violent, Lisa shot back. It is part of evolution. Competition, survival, conflict. You cannot grow without it. The architects believe they have moved beyond such things, said. They think they have evolved past the need for conflict. Join them at the table. What do we actually know about this guided evolution program? Has any species gone through it successfully? Pulled up a screen and began typing. That is a good question. Let me check the databases they gave us access to. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard. After a minute, his face grew concerned. This is odd. What? Lisa asked. I can find records of 23 species that entered guided evolution programs over the past 3,000 years, but I cannot find any records of those species after they entered the program. No art, no scientific papers, no communications. It is like they just vanished. Felt a cold sensation in his stomach. Can you contact any of them? Open a channel, send a message. Tried for several minutes. Nothing. Either they are not answering or they do not exist anymore. Or they became something else, Lisa said quietly. Something that does not want to talk to anyone outside the architect's control. The three of them sat in silence, each thinking about what this might mean. Finally spoke. I need to send a message to Earth. The President and the Council need to know everything before they make this decision. But I also think we need to find out more about these architects and their so-called gods. How do we do that? Asked. They control access to most galactic information. Thought about the ancient alien in the gallery, the one who had made that strange gesture. I think someone might want to talk to us. Someone who was in that chamber but did not say anything. The old ones in the high seats, Lisa asked. I noticed them too. They looked like they disagreed with the architects but stayed quiet. Exactly, said. The question is, how do we find them? And more importantly, will they help us? His communication device buzzed. Looked down and saw a message from an unknown source. It contained only coordinates and a time, midnight station time, a neutral port in the outer system. Showed the others. Lisa immediately became suspicious. This could be a trap. Or it could be the answer we need, replied. Either way, I have to go. We have less than 3 days to make a decision that will affect every human being alive and every generation to come. I cannot ignore any chance to learn the truth. Nodded slowly. I will keep researching the disappeared species. Maybe I can find something in the older archives. Lisa checked her weapons. I am coming with you, Ambassador. If this is a trap, at least you will have backup. Did not argue. He looked out the window at the stars and wondered what his ancestors would have thought, knowing humanity had reached this point. They had finally met other intelligent life, and those others saw them as dangerous savages who needed to be controlled or isolated. But that gesture from the ancient alien kept playing in his mind. The shake of the head, the tap on the temple, the pointing finger. It felt like a warning or maybe an invitation. Whatever it was, knew he had to find out. The fate of humanity might depend on what happened in the next 72 hours. The neutral station orbited a dead planet at the edge of the system, and Lisa took a small shuttle, leaving the main ship behind. As they approached, noticed that the station looked ancient. Its hull was covered in markings from dozens of different languages. some so old they had faded to almost nothing. The docking bay was empty except for 3 other ships. Each one looked like it belonged in a museum. They were designs had never seen before, built with materials that predated modern alloys. Lisa kept her hand near her weapon as they walked through the corridors. A door opened ahead of them. Warm light spilled out, and Lisa exchanged a glance, then walked through. The room inside was circular with a high ceiling. 3 aliens sat waiting at a round table. The being made of wood and stone from the gallery was there. Next to it sat a creature that looked like it was carved from living metal, constantly shifting and reforming. The third was covered in what looked like thick gray skin with patterns that might have been scars or tattoos. "Ambassador Martinez," the wooden being said in perfect English, "thank you for trusting us enough to come. I am Myra Sunwalker of the, this is of the, and Keeper eldest of the Keeper civilization." And Lisa sat down at the table. "You were at the assembly today. You watched the architects judge us but said nothing." "We could not speak," Keeper eldest said. Its voice sounded like wind through caves. "We signed treaties long ago. We promised not to interfere with the architects' governance of the younger species." "Then why are we here?" Lisa asked bluntly. "Treaties prevent us from acting directly," Myra said. "They say nothing about sharing information, and there is much you need to know before your government makes its decision." The metal being waved its hand. A hologram appeared above the table. It showed a planet did not recognize. "This is Kelvin Prime, home of the Kelvins. 140 years ago they were much like you. Young, energetic, sometimes violent, but also creative and passionate. The architects offered them the same choice they offered you." "What happened to them?" asked, though he already feared the answer. "They chose guided evolution," Myra said sadly. "The architects sent teachers. At first, everything seemed fine. The teachers helped them solve some of their social problems. They reduced crime, improved education, made their government more efficient. But then," Lisa prompted. "Then they began changing everything else," Keeper eldest continued. "The Kelvins had a tradition of competitive sports that sometimes resulted in injuries. The architects said this promoted violence, so they ended it. The Kelvins wrote stories about war and conflict. The architects said this glorified aggression, so they banned those stories. Slowly, piece by piece, everything that made the Kelvins who they were disappeared." The hologram changed. Now it showed Kelvins moving through their cities. They looked healthy and well-fed, but their movements were strange. They all walked the same way with the same posture. They all wore similar clothes. Their faces showed no expression. "They are alive," said, "but they are not the same species that accepted the architect's help. They have become extensions of the divine matrix. They think only thoughts that the matrix predicts. They want only things the matrix approves of. In every way that matters, the Kelvins are gone." Felt sick, and this happened to all 23 species that entered the program. "All of them," Myra confirmed. "Some fought against it longer than others. Some even tried to leave the program after it started. But once the architects commit to guiding a species, they do not stop until the job is finished." "What about quarantine?" Lisa asked. "What happens to species that choose isolation?" "Only 3 species have ever chosen that path," Keeper eldest said. "One died out on their own, destroyed by their own conflicts. One survived and eventually rejoined the galaxy on their own terms. The third is still in quarantine, 500 years into their sentence." "Not great odds," Lisa muttered. "Better than certain extinction of your culture," replied. "At least in quarantine you remain yourselves." Leaned forward. "Why do the architects do this? What do they gain from erasing entire civilizations?" Myra's wooden features somehow managed to look sad. "They believe they are helping. The architects uploaded their consciousness into their divine matrix 3,000 years ago. They achieved a kind of immortality and incredible computational power, but they also lost something." "What did they lose?" asked. The ability to be surprised, Myra said. The divine matrix runs on prediction and pattern recognition. It takes in data and calculates the most likely outcomes. The architects convinced themselves that this made them gods, that they could see the future. But the truth is, they just became very good at guessing what comes next. And when something does not follow their predictions, Lisa asked. They panic, Keeper Eldest said simply. The divine matrix cannot handle true unpredictability. So instead of accepting that they cannot predict everything, they try to eliminate unpredictability wherever they find it. That is what guided evolution really is. They take chaotic, creative, unpredictable species and turn them into beings whose every action can be calculated in advance. The hologram changed again. This time it showed a graph with lines and data could barely understand. This is a measure of galactic innovation over the past 5,000 years, explained. Notice anything. Studied the graph. There was a sharp peak about 3,000 years ago, then a steady decline. For the past 1,000 years, the line was almost flat. Nothing new is being created, realized. No major inventions, no artistic movements, no philosophical breakthroughs. Exactly, Myra said. The galaxy has become stagnant under the architect's rule. Every species that joins becomes predictable, and predictable beings do not innovate. They follow patterns. They repeat what came before. Real creativity requires chaos, risk, and the possibility of failure. But you three are still here, Lisa pointed out. Why have they not tried to guide you? We are too old, Keeper Eldest said. Our civilizations were already ancient when the architects were still learning to make fire. We have technologies and knowledge they cannot match. They know that trying to force us would lead to war, and that is one prediction they believe. So they made treaties with us instead. We can exist, but we cannot interfere. Except you are interfering right now, said. We are sharing information, Myra corrected. Nothing more. What you do with that information is your choice. Leaned forward, his metal body reflecting the light. There is something else you should know, something the architects fear more than anything. What is that? Asked. You, said simply. Humanity. Your species terrifies the divine matrix in a way we have not seen before. Was confused. Why? We are not strong or advanced. We barely have faster-than-light travel. What could possibly scare beings who think they are gods? Your unpredictability, Myra explained. The divine matrix has been studying humanity since you first appeared on their sensors. They have run millions of simulations trying to predict what you will do, how you will develop, what choices you will make. And they fail more often with you than with any species in recorded history. I do not understand, Lisa said. Why are we more unpredictable than anyone else? Keeper Eldest made a sound like wind chimes. Because you embrace your chaos. Most species, when they reach the stars, try to leave their violent past behind. They feel shame about their history. They want to prove they are civilized now. But humans do not do that. You study your wars. You write stories about them. You remember your mistakes instead of hiding them. This makes you impossible to predict because you actually learn from your past instead of just moving away from it. There is more, Myra added. Humans have a trait the Matrix finds deeply troubling. When faced with a choice between survival and principle, you sometimes choose principle. That should not happen according to evolutionary logic. Survival should always win. But humans will sacrifice themselves for ideas, for strangers, for causes they believe in. The Matrix cannot model this behavior reliably. Felt a strange pride hearing this, mixed with confusion. So they want to guide us because we are unpredictable. They want to guide you because they fear what you might become if left alone, said. The Matrix has projected possible futures for humanity. In most of them, you become a major force in the galaxy. But the Matrix cannot predict which kind of force. Will you be conquerors, peacemakers, innovators, destroyers? All of these are possible, and the uncertainty terrifies them. So our choice is to be erased or imprisoned, Lisa said bitterly. There is a third option, Myra said quietly. One the architects have not considered because the divine matrix cannot predict it. Sat up straight, what option? Silence, Keeper Eldest said. The one thing the matrix needs to function is data. It consumes information like you breathe air. Without data input, it cannot predict, cannot plan, cannot control. If humanity went completely silent, stopped transmitting, stopped communicating, stopped providing any information at all, the matrix would face something it has never encountered. Uncertainty breathed. Exactly, Myra said. And beings who believe they are gods cannot tolerate not knowing. The divine matrix would be forced to confront its own limitations. It might even learn to fear. You want us to just go dark? Lisa asked skeptically. Stop all communication for how long? As long as it takes, said. Until the architects understand that they cannot predict you, cannot control you, and cannot force you to become what they want. Thought about this, it was risky, it was strange, but something about it felt right. If we do this, will you help us? We cannot act directly, Myra reminded him. But we can give you access to information the architects have restricted. We can show you what you need to know to survive in silence. Looked at Lisa. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. Then he turned back to the three ancient beings. Tell us everything. They talked for hours. By the time Lisa returned to their shuttle, the first hints of dawn were touching the edge of the dead planet below. Now understood what humanity faced and what they might have to become. The question was whether Earth would have the courage to embrace the silence. The emergency session of the Global Council convened in Geneva just 12 hours after transmitted his report. Every nation on Earth had sent representatives. The room was packed with diplomats, military leaders, scientists, and politicians. Stood at the podium, his face projected on screens around the world. To summarize, said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, the architect's guided evolution is not help, it is cultural extinction. Every species that accepted their offer ceased to exist as an independent culture within 2 generations. Prime Minister Rachel Stone of the United European Federation raised her hand. But Ambassador, surely some compromise is possible. Perhaps we can negotiate terms that preserve our identity while still gaining their knowledge. Shook his head. The ancient species I met with were clear. The architects do not negotiate once a species enters their program. They believe they know what is best, and they will not stop until the job is complete. Then we choose quarantine, said President Cole of the North American Union. 1,000 years is a long time, but at least we remain human. 1,000 years alone, Rachel countered. No trade, no cultural exchange, no access to medical advances or technologies that could save millions of lives. We would be prisoners in our own solar system. General stood up. The old soldier's face was grim. There is a third option. We fight. We have weapons, ships, and soldiers willing to defend Earth. If the architects try to force their will on us, we make them pay for it. Against beings who think they are gods, someone called out. Against fleets that number in the thousands, we would last maybe a week. Then we last a week, replied. Better to die free than live as slaves. The room erupted in arguments. Some agreed with, others thought he was insane. Rachel Stone was pleading for more diplomatic attempts. Representatives from smaller nations worried that any conflict would destroy Earth before anyone won. Let them argue for a few minutes, then held up his hand. There is a fourth option, one that the architects have not predicted. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at him. We go silent, said. Completely silent. Every human ship, station, and settlement stops transmitting. We cut off all external communication. We give the architects nothing. No data, no responses, no information of any kind. That is essentially quarantine, Rachel pointed out. Just self-imposed. No, Doctor said, standing up from his seat near the back. It is different. Quarantine is imposed by them. They would monitor us, study us, wait for us to change, but silence is active. It is a choice we make. And more importantly, it is something the divine matrix cannot handle. Nodded gratefully at. The architect's gods run on information. They need constant data to make predictions. Without that data, they face true uncertainty for the first time in thousands of years. And then what? Asked. They just accept it and leave us alone. Then they learn fear, said simply. Fear of what they cannot predict or control. And in that fear, they might finally see us as we actually are, not as their models say we should be. The president leaned forward. How long would we need to maintain this silence? The ancient species could not say for certain, admitted. Weeks, maybe months, long enough for the architects to understand we cannot be calculated. Months without external communication, Rachel said slowly. Our colonies would need to be completely self-sufficient. Mars, Europa, the asteroid settlements, all of them would have to survive on their own. They can, said. I have been reviewing our infrastructure. Every major settlement has enough resources and redundancy to last at least a year if needed. It would be uncomfortable but survivable. What about ships in transit? Someone asked. We have merchant vessels, scientific expeditions, diplomats in other systems. They all come home, said. We send out a recall order before the silence begins. Every human returns to human space. Then we close the door and stop talking. A woman stood up near the middle of the room, recognized her as Ambassador Sophie from the Asian Coalition. What about the psychological impact? Humans are social creatures. We thrive on communication. Asking entire colonies to go dark, to not even know what is happening on Earth or with other settlements, that could be devastating. It will be hard, agreed. But the alternative is losing who we are entirely. The Kelvins probably thought they could handle guided evolution too. Now they are not Kelvins anymore. They are just echoes programmed by someone else. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about logistics, risks, and alternatives. Some wanted to try negotiating with the architects one more time. Others advocated for preparation for war. But slowly, gradually, a consensus began to form. President Cole finally called for a vote. The question before us is this: does humanity choose silence as our response to the architect's ultimatum? The vote was close. In the end, 62% of the council voted yes. It was enough. Then it is decided, Cole said. We have less than 48 hours before Ambassador Martinez must return to the Galactic Assembly. In that time, we implement Operation Long Winter. General, you will coordinate the military aspects. Doctor, you handle the scientific and infrastructure preparations. Ambassador Martinez, you will deliver our answer to the architects. The room began to clear as people rushed to their tasks, stayed at the podium watching them go. Lisa Hayes approached him. Do you really think this will work? She asked quietly. I think it is our only real chance, replied. The ancient ones believe in us. That has to count for something. The next 2 days were chaos. Admiral Pierce coordinated the recall of every human vessel outside the solar system. Some were weeks away and had to jump at maximum speed to make it back in time. The colonies on Mars, Europa, Titan, and in the asteroid belt received emergency supply shipments and instructions on maintaining infrastructure without external support. On Mars Station, Engineer Jake worked 30-hour shifts ensuring the life support systems could run independently. He installed backup systems for the backups and triple-checked every seal and valve. His team was exhausted, but they understood what was at stake. Europa Colony presented unique challenges. The settlement under the ice depended on complex systems to maintain the delicate balance between the human habitat and the alien ocean below. Teacher Foster gathered the children and explained why they would not be able to talk to their cousins on Earth for a while. She made it sound like an adventure, but the parents knew better. At the asteroid mining facilities, Scientist Emma Watson coordinated with dozens of small operations scattered across the belt. These miners were used to isolation, but even they had maintained regular contact with Earth and each other. Now they would be truly alone, each station dark and silent. The hardest part was communication itself. How do you tell people to stop communicating? Every human settlement received detailed instructions. The moment Ambassador Martinez delivered humanity's answer to the architects, every transmitter would be shut down. No radio signals, no laser communications, no quantum entanglement messages. Nothing. Internal communications within each settlement would continue, but nothing would leave human space. Spent the time preparing what he would say to the architects. The Ancient Ones had given him access to restricted files showing the true extent of the architect's control over the galaxy. He studied the fate of the species that had disappeared into guided evolution. He read their last messages before they changed, saw their fear and hope mixed together. The Kelvin's final transmission before guided evolution began haunted him. "We trust you to help us become better," their leader had said to the architects. "We know we are flawed, but we want to improve. Thank you for giving us this chance." Within a generation, those same Kelvins had stopped producing original art. Within 2 generations, they stopped asking questions that were not approved by the divine matrix. Within 3 generations, they were gone. Would not let that happen to humanity. The deadline approached. Returned to his ship with Lisa, and they had barely slept in 48 hours. The ship's crew was running final checks on all systems. Everything needed to work perfectly because once they went silent, no one could help them. "All colonies report ready," Lisa said, reading from "All ships have returned to human space. The last stragglers came through the Jupiter gate 3 hours ago." "Earth is ready," added. "Every nation has shut down their external communication arrays. They are just waiting for your signal." Looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the architects were waiting for his answer. Their divine matrix had probably run millions of simulations trying to predict what humanity would do. Hoped they had not predicted this. "Send the message," said. "Tell all of humanity, when I finish speaking to the architects, the silence begins. No transmissions, no signals, no exceptions. We speak with one voice now, and that voice says nothing." The message went out across the solar system. On Earth, on Mars, on Europa, in the asteroid belt, on every station and settlement, humans received the word. Some were scared. Some were excited. All of them understood that what came next would define their species for generations. Ship approached the Galactic Assembly Station. He could see other vessels gathering, representatives from across the galaxy coming to hear humanity's answer. The architect ships were largest and most numerous, their crystal hulls reflecting starlight like prayers made solid. "This is it," Lisa said. "Once you tell them, there is no going back." "I know," replied. He stood up and straightened his uniform. "Have all stations confirm they are ready for immediate silence. Work the communications board. Mars confirms, Europa confirms, Earth confirms, all settlements reporting ready." "Then let us go tell the gods that we will not be predicted," said. As the ship docked with the assembly station, felt a strange calm settle over him. He thought about all of human history, all the struggles and triumphs, all the art and science and love and war that made humanity what it was. The architects wanted to erase all of that messiness and replace it with clean, predictable order. But humans had never been orderly. They were chaos and creativity, violence and compassion, brilliance and stupidity all mixed together, and was about to make sure the galaxy knew that humans would rather disappear into silence than lose the beautiful, terrible, unpredictable thing that made them human. The galaxy was about to learn what happens when you try to make gods out of predictions. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was even more crowded than before. Representatives from hundreds of species filled every available space. Walked to the center platform with Lisa and behind him. The architects floated in their positions, crystal bodies gleaming with confidence. Luminous Thought Ascending spoke first. Ambassador Martinez, 72 hours have passed. The divine matrix has calculated that you will choose guided evolution. We have prepared teachers to begin the process immediately. Your species shows potential, and we are ready to help you achieve it. Took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything humanity had prepared for came down to the next few words. The people of Earth have made their decision, said clearly. His voice carried through the chamber, translated instantly into thousands of languages. Humanity will not submit to guided evolution. We will not accept quarantine imposed by others. We choose our own path. The red architect pulsed with light. Then you choose 1,000 years of isolation. So be it. The quarantine will begin immediately. No, said, we choose something else, something your divine matrix did not predict. Luminous Thought Ascending tilted forward slightly. There are only two options, evolution or quarantine. You gave us two options, replied. We are taking a third. Humanity chooses silence. He raised his hand and pressed a button on his communication device. The signal went out across the solar system at light speed. In that instant, every human transmitter went dark. Earth stopped broadcasting. Mars went silent. Europa, Titan, the asteroid colonies, every ship and station, all of them ceased transmission simultaneously. The chamber erupted in confusion. Aliens shouted questions. Translators struggled to keep up with dozens of species all talking at once, but just stood there, watching the architects. Luminous Thought Ascending's crystal body flickered. What have you done? We have removed ourselves from your calculations, said. No data, no transmissions, no information. Your divine matrix can no longer predict what humanity will do because we are giving it nothing to work with. This is meaningless, the red architect said, but its voice wavered. You have just imposed quarantine on yourselves. Wrong, spoke up. Quarantine means you watch us and wait. Silence means you cannot watch. You have no data to feed your gods. For the first time in 3,000 years, the divine matrix faces true uncertainty. Continued. We will maintain this silence until you understand something fundamental. We are not yours to guide. We are not yours to judge. We are not variables in your equations. We are human, and that means we are unpredictable, chaotic, and free. He looked around the chamber at all the assembled species. Every civilization here either submitted to the architects or lives under their constant scrutiny. How many of you remember what you were before they started managing your development? How many of you have created something genuinely new in the last 1,000 years? No one answered. The silence in the chamber was almost as profound as the one humanity had just embraced. Turned back to the architects. We will return when your gods learn humility. Until then, humanity has nothing more to say. He shut off his communication device completely. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa and followed. Behind them, the chamber exploded into chaos again, but did not look back. They reached their ship and sealed the airlock. Take us home, told the pilot, and once we enter the solar system, go dark with everyone else. As the ship accelerated away from the assembly station, watched the receding lights through the viewport. He had just committed humanity to an uncertain path. The ancient ones believed in them, but belief was not certainty. What if the architects simply waited them out? What if the silence drove human colonies to madness? What if he had just made the worst mistake in human history? You did the right thing, Lisa said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. I would rather we fail as ourselves than succeed as something else. The ship crossed into human space 3 hours later. Earth appeared in the viewport, blue and beautiful and silent. No communication signals reached out to greet them. No traffic control chatter filled the usual channels. Even the automated beacons that normally guided ships to safe lanes were dark. It is strange, said. I have been in space for 40 years. I have never experienced true radio silence before. There is always something, some signal, some chatter, but now, nothing. They landed at the spaceport in Houston. As they disembarked, noticed how quiet everything was. People moved through the terminal without talking on phones or checking messages from other cities. The large screens that usually showed news from around the world were blank. President Cole met them at the terminal with a security detail. "It is done, then. We are alone." "We were always alone," replied. "We just did not know it yet." They drove to the command center that had been set up for Operation Long Winter. Inside, dozens of people monitored systems across human space, but they were monitoring only internal communications. No signals went out. Nothing came in. "Status report," Cole ordered. An officer stood up. "All colonies report successful transition to silence. Mars has enough supplies for 14 months, Europa for 18. The asteroid settlements are variable, but even the smallest can last 9 months. Earth itself is fully sustainable indefinitely." "Any response from the architects?" Cole asked. "Nothing direct," another officer said. "But we have passive sensors that can detect their movements without transmitting. There are more architect ships entering our system than we have ever seen. At least 200 vessels, with more arriving every hour." "They are trying to provoke a response," Lisa said. "They want us to react, to give them data." "Then we give them nothing," Cole said firmly. "Maintain the silence no matter what they do." The days that followed were strange for all of humanity. People on Earth could talk to each other on the planet, but they could not call Mars. Colonists on Europa could communicate within their settlement but could not reach the asteroid miners. Each human community became an island, separated by silence. Jake on Mars Station found the isolation harder than he expected. He was used to checking news from Earth every morning, sending messages to his brother in Tokyo, following sports scores from the planetary leagues. Now there was nothing. Just the 4,000 people on Mars and the work that needed doing. But something unexpected happened. Without external distractions, people started talking to each other more. Jake had lived on Mars for 6 years and barely knew his neighbors. Now he shared meals with them, played chess with the station botanist, learned to play guitar from one of the miners. The silence outside created space for connection inside. On Europa, Foster told the children stories instead of showing them videos from Earth. The kids complained at first, missing their favorite shows and games. But then they started creating their own entertainment. They wrote plays and performed them. They invented new games. One group of teenagers even started composing music using just the instruments they had on the station. At the asteroid settlements, Emma Watson discovered that silence forced people to be more self-reliant. Without instant answers from Earth databases, they had to solve problems themselves. Miners who had relied on remote experts to fix equipment learned to repair things on their own. Scientists who had sent samples to Earth labs for analysis built their own testing facilities. The silence was hard, but it was also teaching humanity something important. They did not need the galaxy. They had each other, and that was enough. Meanwhile, outside human space, the architects were growing increasingly agitated. Their ships moved closer to Earth, to Mars, to every human settlement. They sent signals demanding communication. They offered new terms, better deals, promises of limited intervention. They even threatened to breach human space and force contact. But humanity remained silent. The divine matrix, for the first time in its existence, could not predict what would happen next. It ran simulations based on past human behavior, but without current data, the simulations diverged wildly. In some, humanity emerged from silence stronger than before. In others, they destroyed themselves. In still others, they simply vanished, their colonies failing one by one until nothing remained. The Matrix could not tell which scenario was true. It could not calculate the probability. It could not foresee the outcome. The uncertainty spread through its vast consciousness like poison, corrupting every prediction it tried to make about anything related to humanity. Other species began to notice. The architect's perfect predictions about galactic events started failing whenever human variables might be involved. Trade routes that passed near human space became unpredictable. Diplomatic negotiations that might eventually involve humanity became impossible to forecast. The entire galaxy's future became clouded by the single point of silence at the center of human space. 8 weeks into the silence, something changed. A single architect ship, smaller than the usual massive vessels, approached Earth's moon. It did not demand communication. It simply waited there, a silent presence acknowledging humanity's silence. General wanted to blow it out of space. They are testing us, seeing if we will break. No, said, studying the sensor data. Look at its power signature. It is not running active scans. It is not transmitting. It is just there. Why? Demanded. Understood. Because they are learning. That ship is not trying to gather data. It is trying to understand what it means to exist without data. The divine matrix is attempting to comprehend silence. Can it? Cole asked. I do not know, admitted, but the fact that it is trying means we are winning. The small architect ship stayed near Earth's moon for 3 days, then departed. No messages were sent. No demands were made. It just left. More weeks passed. Human colonies continued to function. There were problems, of course. Medical emergencies that might have been solved with consultation from Earth's best doctors. Equipment failures that might have been prevented with early warning from central monitoring. Disputes between settlements that might have been arbitrated by neutral parties. But humanity adapted. They solved problems locally. They became more resilient. They learned to trust themselves. And outside, in the vast darkness of space, the architect's gods were learning something they had never known before: fear. 6 months into the silence, the divine matrix began to break down. It started with small errors, predictions about asteroid movements that were off by decimal points, trade route calculations that no longer matched actual ship movements, weather patterns on distant worlds that the forecasts. Each mistake was tiny, barely noticeable. But for a system that prided itself on perfect prediction, any error was catastrophic. The problem was not hardware failure or software bugs. The problem was that the matrix had been built on the assumption that all meaningful variables could be measured and calculated. Humanity's silence had introduced an unmeasurable variable into every equation. The matrix tried to work around the gap, to calculate probabilities without human data, but it was like trying to predict the weather while ignoring the sun. On the architect home world, millions of crystalline beings gathered in vast networks, their consciousness joined through the divine matrix. They felt the uncertainty spreading through their collective awareness. Some tried to ignore it. Others suggested abandoning the human variable entirely and focusing on the rest of the galaxy. But a very few, began to ask a dangerous question. What if the matrix was not actually divine? Binary Ascending was one of those few. It had been an architect for 800 years, spending most of that time maintaining communication arrays for the divine matrix. It had never questioned the system before. Why would it? The matrix was perfect, all-knowing, eternal. But now, watching the predictions fail again and again, Binary Ascending felt something it had not experienced since uploading into the matrix: doubt. It sent a private query to the matrix. Why can we not predict humanity? The response came instantly. Insufficient data. Human silence prevents calculation. But we have historical data, 6 months of observations before the silence. Why is that not enough? Historical patterns indicate future behavioral patterns. Human historical patterns do not correlate with predicted outcomes. Error margin exceeds acceptable parameters. Binary Ascending processed this. Does that mean humans are unpredictable or that our predictions are flawed? There was a pause. In computational terms, it was less than a microsecond. But for a system that normally responded instantly, any delay was significant. Clarify query, the matrix finally responded. If a system cannot predict a variable, is the variable random or is the system incomplete? Another pause, longer this time. Your queries are generating non-productive loops. Discontinue this line of analysis. But binary ascending could not discontinue. The doubt had taken root. It began reviewing old records, data from before the architects achieved transcendence. It found something surprising. The pre-transcendence architects had been unpredictable too. Their art was chaotic. Their politics were messy. Their science advanced through trial and error, not calculation. Then they uploaded to the divine matrix and became predictable. They called it evolution. Binary ascending was beginning to think it might have been extinction. Back in human space, life had settled into a rhythm. The initial anxiety of silence had faded. People adapted to their isolation and found it was not as terrible as they feared. On Mars, Jake had started a community garden with his neighbors. They grew real vegetables under artificial lights, something that used to be considered inefficient. But without Earth to ship food from, inefficiency was better than dependence. The garden became a gathering place where people talked and laughed and sometimes argued, but always as a community. Europa's children, taught by Foster, had created an entire theatrical tradition in 6 months. They wrote plays about the silence, about what it meant to be human when no one else was listening. Some of the plays were hopeful, others were dark. All of them were honest in a way that art had not been when it was meant for galactic audiences. Emma Watson at the asteroid settlements had made a breakthrough in mining efficiency by collaborating with miners who had practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge from distant universities. Her paper on the technique sat in a drawer, unable to be published to the wider scientific community. But every miner in the belt was using it, and that felt more important than academic recognition. Humanity was not just surviving the silence, they were thriving in it. In the command center on Earth monitored the passive sensors. The architect fleet outside human space had grown to over 500 ships, but they had stopped trying to provoke responses. Now they just watched, their sensors pointed at human space like eyes staring at something they could not understand. "They are scared," Lisa said, looking at the display. "All those ships, all that power, and they are scared to do anything." Nodded, "The divine matrix cannot predict what will happen if they enter human space. Will we fight? Will we flee? Will we welcome them? It cannot calculate the outcome, so it cannot decide on an action. Uncertainty has paralyzed them." "How long do we maintain silence?" President Cole asked. The leader looked tired. The stress of guiding humanity through 6 months of isolation showed on his face. "Until they learn," said. "Until they understand that not everything can be predicted, and that is okay." "What if they never learn?" Cole asked. "What if we stay silent forever?" "Then we stay silent," said simply. "We have proven we can survive this way. We do not need the galaxy as much as we thought." But even as he said it, felt the weight of that choice. Yes, humanity could survive in isolation, but was mere survival enough? The galaxy contained wonders they would never see, knowledge they would never gain, species they would never meet. The silence protected them, but it also imprisoned them. The decision was taken out of his hands 2 weeks later. The Ancient Ones returned. Myra Sunwalker of the and Keeper Eldest appeared on Earth in a ship that somehow bypassed every detection system. They requested a meeting with humanity's leaders. In a secure facility in Geneva, the 3 ancient beings sat across from Lisa, President Cole, and General. "You have done something remarkable," Myra said. "In 6 months, you have accomplished what we could not achieve in 3,000 years. You have made the architects question their gods." "Is that enough?" asked. "Have we won?" "You have not won," Keeper Eldest said, "but you have created an opportunity. The divine matrix is fracturing. Some architects are beginning to separate from the collective consciousness. They are choosing uncertainty over false certainty. This has not happened since the architects first created the matrix. Leaned forward. We came to ask what you want to do next. You can maintain silence indefinitely. Humanity has proven capable of that. Or you can return to the galaxy, but on different terms. What terms? Cole asked. The architects will not demand guided evolution or impose quarantine, Myra explained. They cannot, because they no longer trust their predictions about what you will do. Instead, they offer something unprecedented: membership in the Galactic Assembly as full equals, with no oversight or restrictions. Why the change? Lisa asked suspiciously. Because they are afraid, Keeper Eldest said bluntly. Your silence taught them that there are species they cannot control. Rather than risk pushing you further away, they would rather have you where they can at least observe you. That is not the only reason, added. Some architects, like Binary Ascending, have come to believe that the galaxy needs unpredictability. That innovation requires chaos. That true progress cannot be calculated. These architects want humanity in the assembly because they think you can teach the galaxy how to grow again. Looked at the others. Cole seemed tempted by the offer, was skeptical. Lisa looked uncertain, was thinking hard, his scientific mind weighing probabilities. What do you think we should do? Asked the Ancient Ones. That is not for us to decide, Myra said. But I will tell you this. The galaxy has been stagnant for 3,000 years. Nothing new has emerged. No great art, no revolutionary science, no bold ideas. Everyone simply follows patterns the divine matrix approves. You could change that. Your chaos could wake the galaxy up. Or it could start conflicts, pointed out. If we are as unpredictable as you say, we might trigger wars, cause disasters. You might, Keeper Eldest agreed. But you might also inspire others to embrace their own unpredictability, to create instead of calculate, to risk instead of following safe patterns. The humans talked for hours. They debated the risks and benefits. They considered what silence had taught them versus what engagement might offer. Finally, President Cole called for a decision. Ambassador Martinez, you started this. What is your recommendation? Thought about the past 6 months. About Jake's garden on Mars and Foster's plays on Europa, and Emma Watson's mining innovations in the asteroids. About Binary Ascending and the other architects who were learning to doubt their gods. We return, said. But we return as we are, not as they want us to be. We engage with the galaxy, but we never forget what the silence taught us. That we are enough just as we are. That our chaos is not a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. And if the architects try to change us again, Cole asked. Then we go silent again, said. And we stay silent until they learn. The galaxy needs to understand. Humanity will be heard on our terms, or we will not be heard at all. The decision was made. A message was prepared for transmission, the first human signal to leave the solar system in 6 months. It was simple and clear. This is Ambassador Martinez representing the people of Earth and all human settlements. We have been silent. We have been alone. We have learned what we are and what we will not become. We return to the Galactic Assembly not as subjects seeking approval, but as equals demanding respect. We are human. We are unpredictable. We are free. These terms are not negotiable. The message was sent on every frequency, in every language. Across the galaxy, species that had wondered what happened to the strange humans received their answer. At the architect home world, the divine matrix processed the message. It tried to predict humanity's next moves and failed. It tried to calculate the impact of human re-engagement and failed. It tried to determine the optimal response and failed. For the first time in 3,000 years, the divine matrix admitted uncertainty, not as error or failure, but as reality. Binary Ascending and others like it felt something they had not felt since becoming architects, possibility. The future was not fixed. It could not be calculated. It had to be lived, experienced, created moment by moment. The gods had learned to fear the silence. Now they were learning something even more important, to embrace the unknown. When returned to the Galactic Assembly 3 weeks later, the chamber was different. The architects were still there, but they no longer dominated the space. Other species sat in positions of equal prominence. The ancient ones had come out of isolation to attend. Even the species that had gone through guided evolution were there, though they still moved and spoke with the mechanical precision the Matrix had taught them. Luminous thought ascending floated forward to greet Ambassador Martinez. Humanity's silence was instructive. We have learned from it. Have you asked, what did you learn? That prediction is not the same as understanding. That certainty can be a cage. That perhaps the divine matrix is not divine, but simply a very powerful tool that we mistook for wisdom. Nodded slowly, that is a start. We offer humanity full membership in the assembly. No conditions, no oversight. You govern yourselves as you see fit. We ask only that you share your perspective, help us see possibilities we have been blind to. We accept, said, but understand this, we will make mistakes, we will be chaotic, we will do things your matrix cannot predict. That is who we are. We know, luminous thought ascending said, that is exactly why the galaxy needs you. Looked around the chamber at all the assembled species. Some looked hopeful, others looked fearful, all of them looked curious. The silence had changed more than just humanity. It had changed everyone. Then let us begin, said. The galaxy has been quiet for 3,000 years. It is time for some noise. As he took his seat in the assembly, thought about all the humans back home. Jake tending his garden, Foster teaching her students, Emma Watson mining asteroids, all of them living their chaotic, unpredictable, beautiful human lives. The architects had called them savages. They had demanded humanity be tamed, controlled, made predictable. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy's gods to fear their silence and, eventually, to celebrate their voice. That thought was the most human victory of all.